It's Spoilerin Time. This is the show where we take all that hard work we do on our other show, Cordkillers, figuring out how to watch some things, and talk about them. This week, we are going to talk about The Larry Sanders Show, episodes 11 and 12 of season 4. We're going to talk about What We Do in the Shadows, season 2, episode 10, and discuss our viewings of the movie Casablanca. I'm Tom Merritt. He's Brian Brushwood.
Heck yeah. What order do you want to go in?
The order in the rundown.
Okay, so starting off with Larry Sanders, I guess.
Nope. The order in the rundown is Casablanca first.
Doggone it. You said that last. I don't look at the rundown.
Because I do it in reverse order every time.
Okay, all right. Tom, not going to lie.
Yes.
I was genuinely not looking forward to the homework of eating my vegetables and watching Casablanca. Part of this is because the whole world has a giant, big old hooray state. They have a giant
state. Is that like a state of a computer? Like
I'm trying to think of a synonym for the B word that won't get us in the mature category. Everybody has a hooray state for this movie. There are entire college courses that do nothing
so many other words
but break down.
Man, I got a hooray state for Ingrid Bergman, if you know what I mean.
There are entire college courses where they break down scene by scene just how good Casablanca is. I wasn't looking forward to watching it last night.
Felt like work. Felt like homework. I get it.
It felt totally like homework. And last night I said, hey, I have to watch this to Bonnie. And we ended up chatting about other stuff. We spent like an hour talking. And then suddenly I realized it's pretty late. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do the homework thing. I'm going to watch this Casablanca. I got 3 minutes in, and then I realized this movie does not deserve to be started and fallen asleep to. And I stopped it, and I set an alarm for the following morning. The following morning, alarm goes off. I get up, start banging a bell, and I tell all the children, I say, you do not have to watch the entire movie. You must join me for the first 5 minutes. That's it.
Okay.
And I gathered everyone. My 16-year-old had another appointment, so she ran off. But everybody else stayed and loved it. Tom, let me state unequivocally, Casablanca is the best Star Wars movie ever.
I love that. I love that you said that.
I mean, and I can't be the first person to make that comparison. I mean, obviously, one derives the DNA from the other, right?
Obviously, the Mos Eisley Spaceport has clear allusions, and George Lucas loved to do this. Like, there are whole books written about all the different great movies that George Lucas was alluding to in Star Wars, and Mos Eisley Spaceport particularly is got clear allusions to Rick's American Cafe for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, what you have in the cafe is a wacky cast of highly different cultures slash, aliens, right? In a place that is under the control of, barely, but on the fringes of a universal power, the Nazi Party, aka the Empire. You have Han Solo as a bartender who's repeatedly stating that he's apolitical, doesn't give a damn, he's here for the money or whatever, but proven to have a heart of gold, right? Up to and including the lie that he gives at the end of the thing. It's great, and it's tight, and it's perfect, and I can't wait. Now I feel, by virtue of having done my homework, I feel like I finally get to enter that delightful smug clubhouse of people, along with Kubrick films and other stuff, of people who get to deconstruct just how great that movie is.
Well, and that's the beauty of Casablanca to me, and it's my favorite movie, which is why I made us watch it, is that it was supposed to be schlock. This movie was created in January 1942. Like, when I say created, like, they started writing it in January 42. They premiered it in theaters in December. They rushed it because there was an invasion of Africa happening. and they wanted to take advantage of the enthusiasm for the actual invasion of the area Casablanca was in to lift receipts to the movie. This was not engineered to be a classic. They bought a never produced stage play to turn this into a movie, and they had like multiple writers. It's just like on paper you look at this and like, no, that's not how you make a great movie.
I stumbled
and
across
yet it is.
some news story that said that I guess in the 80s, they took the original script, which, by the way, was originally going to be called Everybody Stays at Rick's or Everybody Goes to Rick's.
That's the stage play. That's the name of the actual stage play that they bought the rights to make Casablanca.
And they submitted it to a bunch of Hollywood folks, and like maybe 20% of them were like, this is Casablanca. Did you somehow expect to fool me? And the rest of them were like, not enough sex. like this will never work. What about you, Bryce? What was your experience like?
I had I guess I didn't see it as much of a chore going into it, only because it's very highly acclaimed even today. We just saw it's number 3 on the AFI Top 100, so there's got to be something good with it. I don't watch a lot of movies from this time period, and I don't know. It kept feeling surreal that there was that there was as much depth to it as there was. But I really enjoyed it, and I felt good about it. I felt like Humphrey Bogart's character, but like Rick was like kind of an interesting archetype that we don't see very much of, right? Like Brian, you mentioned the Han Solo sort of reference or Ford reference, whatever. But I thought it was really nice and complex, like a little more complicated than I expected it to be. But I really enjoyed it.
They invested more time than I would have expected in making us feel like his apathy was justified. That's the part I didn't expect. And then that, and there were what I felt like for the time fairly progressive coy references made to open marriages and they like I'm just like, I'm sorry, 70s I get it, but 1942 you're making that joke.
But I think like he was meant to come across as surly and not a person you would bring to mixed company, right? Like that it was supposed to be kind of racy, those comments, and like a lot of like half insults, just like I literally don't care, I'm a dude in no man's land, you can't make me care.
In the chat, E. Clay Thompson makes the case that Renault was meant to be more Han Solo than Rick. I very much disagree, because Rick maintained his neutrality and pledged allegiance to the dollar, and
so did Renault.
The very second Renault very clearly positioned himself as, I'm just the corrupt local guy. Hey, what can you do? The second Han Solo tilted to one side, the second Rick says, makes a decision and says, I'm on the side of the Allies, you instantly watch Renault do double backflips to say, anyway, here's papers and we're going to go on adventures together, and secretly we're on the same team the whole time. I was just waiting for you to say that. Thanks, man.
Yeah, Renault blows with the wind. Han Solo doesn't blow with the wind. Han Solo blows where Han Solo wants to go, and that's the difference. Renault doesn't follow his own whims. He tries to follow the prevailing winds, whereas Rick Blaine, the Han Solo of Casablanca, Humphrey Bogart's character, he lives for himself, and he won't suck up to the authorities. He doesn't suck up to Captain Renault, which is why Renault respects him. Like, they have an uneasy kind of respect of like, I know how much not to push you, you know how much not to push me.
One of the things that's great about the movie is I tend to, when I'm watching a thing, the second it's over, figure out like okay, where was the fat? Like what was in there? Why was that stuck in there? Was it just too precious, too expensive, too valuable, and they couldn't, some editor somewhere couldn't bring themselves to remove it? This is what, 97 minutes, I think, runtime. Number one, there's not much fat, but if I have to look for the fattiest parts, it's I almost wonder if we couldn't have done without seeing Rick and what's her name in the whole flashback.
The flashback felt very superfluous.
Yeah, right?
And I wonder if it's just the audience tastes and intelligence have changed a little bit in the 70, 80 years since. But it felt like, no, I got it. You guys had a whole thing in France fighting the Axis.
And there was also if I bet it felt really novel at the time to have the two characters in a fake car with a background and to have the background crossfade, but the car stay the same. Sure. I bet that felt novel and in a Quentin Tarantino kind of way. But it felt dumb now. Again, not to take anything away from Casablanca.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's honestly Casablanca. I think one of the things you can give it the most credit for is you have fewer of those kinds of moments where you go, the technology, right?
Yeah.
Like so much of it still holds up, even though it's black and white. Like it just still looks good. It's still shot well. They didn't make too many of those kind of compromises. And I think that's one of the reasons that the flashback scene does stick out is that you have more of those offsets where, like, by the way, this whole thing was shot down the street here in Los Angeles. They didn't have any locations for that. But for some reason, the Paris stuff feels more like it's a fake location than the actual Casablanca stuff does. And you're right that it does stick out because of its abrupt change of tone, but you need it. And it could be trimmed. You're right. It could be it's certainly the fattiest part. I'll agree with that. But you need to see Rick Blaine when he wasn't beaten down. I think that's important to be like, oh, that's him. He really was optimistic. He wasn't just a different version of the beaten down guy we see. He was high on life. You want to see that Ilsa definitely was in love with him. No question about it. Wasn't leading him on, was head over heels until you see that moment. And this is one of the things I love about Casablanca. They don't over explain. You see the moment when she has got the letter, when her eyes go from flushed and loving to hesitant and fearful because she now knows her husband is alive. And you need to see that heartbreak on the platform. A lot of the other stuff you could have done without. I think you're right. But you need to see that stuff because that now makes their relationship solid when you come back to it. It makes it legitimate that they would have this sort of ability to fool each other, that maybe they're doing it for them. And that classic line, will always have Paris, hits harder, I think, because you've seen that.
Yeah, there's also hats off to that moment where I think he's getting something. I think he's getting cash out of the safe where you see him exit the frame, but you see his silhouette doing business off to the side. Then you see his silhouette exit and then him walk back into frame, knowing that was all shot in one at a time where Hollywood was just figuring out that they could, snap from scene to scene to scene to keep that in that traditional theatrical style. I thought was and to execute it so well, I thought was really good.
Yeah, it's just such a, like you said, it's a tight movie. Nothing is wasted. It's a great love story. It's somewhat of an adventure spy story. And it's a metaphor for its time. It was avowedly written as a stage play to kind of shine a light on American isolationism before they entered the war. By the time it's made into a movie and put out, it's now being used to fire up people and keep them understanding why the country is in the war, right? Its context is different by 1942. But I always like the way they handled this idea of, well, there's the bad German and then there's the good German. There's the collaborationist French and then there's the people of France, and Russia is there, and everybody's represented, and Rick is the America that doesn't want to get involved.
I mean, to be honest, it makes me wonder how much of the naming of Rick Sanchez is really a tip of the hat to the original Rick, And then likewise, some of the most adventurous moments feel like for example, the dude who's haggling at the market, trying to sell some stuff. Like that's about as exotic as they try to portray. But that DNA definitely shows up in Raiders of the Lost Ark and all of the Indiana Jones sequels from there.
Yeah, I mean, if there's knocks on Casablanca, it's that it's not realistic. This is not actually what Casablanca looked like at the time. It's not representative of the city and its makeup, or even the people that lived in it. But that is not what it was intending to be. It's meant to be an allegory, and it's meant to be a metaphor. And it's, I mean, I don't know, but I don't know if it struck you just how many cliche lines are in Casablanca. It's kind of hard to look past them now. They kind of stand out as like, oh, that old line, but they were new when this movie came out.
Yeah. Well, I know for sure that in my 20s, I rented from Blockbuster. That's right. Used to rent places. I rented Godfather, but by the time I saw Godfather, everything had been so parodied, so cliched, so like I hated everything about it. I did not have that experience with Casablanca at all. Like everything felt fresh, and maybe it's because it's so old that I don't even hear parodies of any of that anymore. Here's looking at you, kid, or whatever. Yeah, if there's anything dated, it's having a person of color relegated to the role of a piano player or whatever. But I don't think anyone could deny that was definitely of the time,
Well, and you could say it's not relegated. He's treated well. He's a musician.
As a matter of fact, like ahead of the curve. Well,
yeah,
like not only ahead of the curve in that he has a 10% stake, but he, what's his name? Rick says, he has a 25% stake, right?
Stake,
and they're like, I know it's 10, but whatever, I'll pay it. Like I mean, it was super progressive in that regard.
Right. The one line that sticks out and if we could do it all over again, I'd tell him not, is when Ilsa says to tell the boy at the piano.
Yeah, and even that, I was kind of proud that, like, I had this moment where I'm like, well, do I take a moment to tell my children that phrase has connotations now? And I didn't say anything because it's like, that's fine. If, much like Gone with the Wind, that'd be fine if that baggage, evaporated behind us.
Yeah. And movies of this era are often full of problematic things. That's the only one. I don't know if I missed others, but that's the only one that really, really stuck out.
Yeah, those. But again, I think that by and large, that movie has acquitted itself well over the years. Yeah. It's held up.
And I still get moved by it. The scene where they out-sing the Horstwessel song by singing La Marseillaise.
Plus also
still brings tears to my eyes.
Knowing that Rick is like his whole definition is like, I don't care nothing but the dollars. Give me them francs. I don't care about nothing. And then that moment is so offensive. He's like, start playing the French national anthem. It's awesome. It's great.
Yeah, there's so many good scenes. Anything else on Casablanca?
No, thank you for serving me Brussels sprouts. I didn't think I would enjoy them, but I enjoyed them very, very much, and I'm very thankful, which means in after talk, that means Bryce gets to give us a pick.
I have ideas.
Okay.
I have ideas.
All right. That's Casablanca. Let's talk about What We Do in the Shadows, the season 2 finale, episode 10, Nouveau Théâtre de Vampire.
Man, lot of threads come together here. In general, I had a blast. This is a very good episode. I enjoyed. We've seen 2 seasons of the winding up of the coil of Guillermo's story. That is all now released to hilarious effect, where all of his vampire friends are confused as to what just happened. They're so dumb. They literally don't understand that they just watched a mass vampire slaughter. Number 2, cool trick to imply that the whole vampire council is there by having a lot of people in masks and having Jermaine Clement be the only one to take off his mask.
Right.
Number 3, I guess at some point it's implied that Guillermo knew about the Nadia doll. I thought that was going to be more of a reveal because it seemed like they were hiding that earlier on. But also, we're now at a place of honesty where Guillermo understands that there's nothing interesting in the world outside of being with these, whether he's a familiar or whatever. Like the outside world holds nothing for him. And the council knows, everybody knows. If there's one wish I had is I wish this was an hour-long episode with so much more of the theatrical play reenactment of everything that we've seen before. That's my only wish.
Yeah.
I know. I kept wanting to get a longer look at the stand-ins because early on I was almost convinced it was them playing versions of themselves. It was so good.
Kind of an abrupt ending, I think, really put a button on how short this episode feels, because so much of it is tied to, like, yes, we're seeing, what the council thinks happened in all these murders, but really what we're doing is just TV business of, like, we need to let you know all the things that happened in case you haven't seen everything, which just feels like eaten up time, especially when you're streaming it, right? If you're watching it, like, on Hulu and you know what happened.
Which, by the way, works in Avatar: The Last Airbender. They were apparently given the instruction from Nickelodeon that, hey, we need a recap episode. We're coming up on the end of the series. You have to bring everyone up to speed. And they're like, we don't want to do a remember when this, that, the other thing. So instead, while they're in the Fire Nation in disguise as Fire Nation people, they go to a play that is the story of the Avatar, and they are all the greatest hits of that, but seen from, it's a lot of shared DNA. Only this version of it, you had 3 timelines. You had them watching it, still not figuring out that they got. You had the play representing what happened, and then you had this instant flashback to the actual moment, which made everything a bit of a clumpier collage than I would have expected.
So what you're saying is they did it better in Avatar.
I mean,
because I didn't understand most of what you just said, having never seen it, but I'm getting the gist here.
They did pretty much the same thing as what Brian is
correct.
saying.
Only in Avatar they did it without also flashing back to those moments and adding that. Sort of, made everything messier. I don't think it helped everything.
I'd also, just one last thing on the abruptness of the ending, is also, like, all of that tension with, like, them watching Guillermo kill all these vampires and, his continued frustration of being put in this servient role forever, doesn't have anywhere to go, and that stinks. I don't want to wait another year for that.
I don't mind that. I love, in fact, the reveal of, like, finally he's a vampire slayer, and this is what a vampire slayer does, and he is embracing his role, but he's doing it in service of vampires because he's also Guillermo, who loves vampires, and this is a lovely, like, marriage of those two conflicting impulses for him to be able to do. And I'm incredibly curious where they're going to go with this. That said, my problem with this episode is it just didn't feel funny. It wasn't bad. It just didn't have a lot of laughs.
Not a lot of jokes. Yeah.
Yeah.
You are right, but I still had a smile on my face the entire time. And I think my smile comes from, and we've talked about this, my smile came from the release of tension. We've had tension building up and secrets held or whatever, and like seeing all of that just melt away was very joyful for me. I liked it quite a bit.
No, that's a really good way of putting it. Like, I enjoyed the episode. I didn't at one point think like, let me check my watch. It was after it was over that I was like, I didn't really laugh that much.
Well,
I usually laugh a lot.
Think about it this way. If you wanted to introduce somebody to the series, this would be the worst possible episode. Because you would do nothing but spend all of your time explaining why it's funny that Nandor's wearing a Dream Team 1992, jersey and all of this other stuff. But as a longtime fan, it was very satisfying.
Yeah, this is a very lore dependent episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like even right down to imagine somebody who had never seen the show get to the casual moment that Guillermo goes in a door, trips over a body, has a conversation with a talking doll, and then leaves to go slaughter a theater. Like, how do you even like, you can't.
Also, I will say to that, what is the end result here? Is the council dead? Like, I get that something big happened, right? This is an escalation from a lot of little murders to one big massacre of vampires. But are we going to keep playing this, the council is after the crew bit again? Are we going to keep doing the Guillermo is feeling stifled?
Here's what I suspect.
We need new things.
There are no witnesses left.
Season 1 is sort of the definitive, tone. Season 2 is also, here's the wider supernatural world. Season 3 will be, okay, the 5 of us are on the run. We still treat Guillermo like a piece of garbage. We're just in hiding. Don't worry, we're going to hide out with some werewolves for a while. Ooh, who hates werewolves? Me, all of us.
We
all
hate
werewolves.
They will never find us because we are with werewolves.
Right. Well, we're going to leave the werewolves. We can't take the stink anymore. Now we're going to live with the voodoo lady or whatever it is.
I think what we're set up for, and they tipped their hat with the depiction of events in this one on stage, is no one's going to believe that Guillermo killed all those vampires.
Right. They will
it's going to be our
deny
4
it.
vampire friends.
Except for the vampire Guillermo, who Guillermo let leave before all the killing started. And Jermaine Clement, who escaped as a bat.
Oh, he did. That's right.
So there are 2 loose threads there.
He's the vampire Guillermo.
Yeah, because remember he's on stage and
it's the one that he couldn't bring himself to kill. Like he holds up and goes,
Guillermo.
"Yeah, that'd be too weird," and he's like, "Get out of here." Yeah.
The actor Guillermo may or may not be a vampire though, right?
They said everyone who participated was a vampire. All vampire.
Okay.
Also,
right.
they're not shy about having teenaged vampires in. As a matter of fact,
I think the actor vampire may or may not play a part later. Maybe because he was spared, he keeps his mouth shut, or we could just ignore him and he never comes back. I don't think that is going to be a big issue. Jermaine Clement's character is going to be motivated to cover this up because it's his problem, right? So if he goes back and says Guillermo the familiar killed all these people, they're not going to believe him. So he's going to have to push the story that these 4 vampires whom we had brought here because of their horrible killing turned on us and killed everyone, and something must be done. And right? It's not my fault. They're just too powerful.
There could be, let me just toss this out there. I don't know what's on Jermaine Clement's schedule, but if he has more time to appear on camera, I could even see a version of this where he goes to the 4 saying, "Look, it will be very bad if it looks like this wasn't on purpose. So I propose that the 5 of us proclaim that they were all traitors and we killed them all together."
I don't think that leaves you a lot of conflict to tell season 2, though.
Season 3.
3, sorry.
But I'm just saying, there's more on the table than one might think, is what I'm saying. And I think. Sure. I get the impression, and I have no reason, no inside knowledge of this. I get the impression that Jermaine Clement is getting more into this as it becomes more successful because it keeps getting more interesting, and I keep seeing more of his fingerprints all over everything.
Well, I get that impression because he was put in charge of it, and Taika said, "I'll lend my name, but I'm too busy."
Right, but he was in charge of it from the beginning. but it's feeling increasingly.
He's getting his sea legs, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, just now that we're done with season 2, Kyle Newacek directed a ton, most of the episodes this season, and I think he is. I would say that the humor of the season is in no small part to him. He was one of the creators of Workaholics and directed a ton of those episodes.
Oh, right on.
So you're saying Kyle Newacek is the Guillermo of What We Do in the Shadows directors.
The underappreciated badass
I guess so.
of the entire thing.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on What We Do in the Shadows?
No, dude. What a wonderful wild ride. Also, by the way, pro tip: if you have teenage daughters and you're enjoying the show, but you realize it's going to get awkward because there's an entire episode dedicated to extracting semen, here's a little trick. What you do is you say to your teenage daughters, hey, I want to show you this episode of What We Do in the Shadows, but the whole thing is about extracting semen. Do you guys still want to watch it? And then they both say yes, and then it's not weird at all. I promise.
Okay, if you say so. There we go. That's What We Do in the Shadows, Season 2, Episode 10. Let's talk about The Larry Sanders Show, episodes 11 and 12 of Season 4, I Was a Teenage Lesbian, and Larry's Sitcom. I Was a Teenage Lesbian stars, I will say stars, not just guest stars, but almost stars Brett Butler. She is essential to the plot from beginning to end in a way that a lot of times the guests aren't, because she had a relationship with Paula and thinks it might cause problems, while Paula is dealing with a breast cancer scare, which is making her act weird because she doesn't really want to talk about it with everybody. And so Brett Butler, by the way, not the shortstop, but the actor who played in the series Grace Under Fire, which is very confusing to me when I first saw the description before I saw the show. Anyway, it's all about Brett Butler and Paula, really.
So this is the part where I confess that I don't think I've seen a single episode of Grace Under Fire.
Nor have I.
And I understood from context that Brett Butler was a big deal. And I also understood that it was probably a big deal that both she and Janine Garofalo were portraying having had a same-sex fling or whatever. But all of that felt like, I bet this was a decently big deal 30 years ago.
I mean, I'm sure there's some context 30 years ago, but did it still not work as just like famous actor and booker? Like the story still 100% worked for me, even though I didn't have the hit of like, oh my gosh, it's the Grace Under Fire lady.
There was a little bit of sort of like there was constantly lingering on moments that the moment I was like, why are we lingering on this? I had to pause, take myself back and say early 90s. And then I was like, oh, okay, I guess that was probably novel in the early 90s.
There was more of that. To me, there was more of that because they were dealing with lesbian topics. So
sure.
You know, edgy in a way that it wouldn't be as much.
Yes. And I suspect that it was also combined with the white hot fame of Brett Butler at the time and all that stuff. Having said all of that, it was fine. It was fine. It was another episode that I think was probably important for its time, but felt a little redundant in the current age.
I need to make a correction. Brett Butler was a center fielder, not a shortstop. The one that wasn't in this episode. Then we have Larry's Sitcom, where Larry has in his contract that he can pitch a sitcom and is sort of like wanting to rake in the rents, you know, get all the fame and the money from a successful sitcom without having to do any of the work. And so Chris Elliott, in a certain way, kind of like Brett Butler, becomes a major character of the episode as Larry tries to take his idea and make it network friendly.
It's so bizarre that, if I'm remembering correctly, this is between Chris Elliott. Like at the time he did this, I believe the number one thing he was known for was his failed sitcom Get a Life, and then and yet before his, you know, as we all beloved him for being on Schitt's Creek. It's I feel like whatever story we watched is not quite as interesting as the behind the scenes story of why he was selected and what they were really, quote unquote, really saying at the time or whatever. Like,
Really? See that I don't spend. And I'm just different than you. I don't spend too much time thinking about that stuff because it distracts me from the actual plot and enjoying what's actually going on in the episode.
Yeah. Well, and man, now you really got me thinking, because like his whole thing is sort of a version of the Seinfeld pitching Seinfeld plot, where George keeps insisting, no, nothing happens. And that's the joke is that's a weird thing to do at a pitch, is to, commit to a bad idea when people are trying to give you a yes. I would love to know which of those happened first. But again,
obviously,
I can't,
obviously Seinfeld's on the air here.
Yeah. Yes. But I don't know if that thing happened yet.
Episode. You mean that episode with George?
Correct.
Where they reveal that? Chris Elliott, 85 through 88, Late Night with David Letterman, 90 through 92, Get a Life. And as Cabin Boy, 94. And then as they reference in this episode, was cast member for Saturday Night Live, 94 through 95.
Yeah. For one season.
Recently.
Yeah. Man, that's interesting. I don't know that we'll meet in the middle, but I'm so fascinated by the Hollywood aspects of things that definitely
I do
preoccupies.
think about those things. I don't want to be too absolutist about it. I mean, obviously that's what makes rewatching this kind of fun, is thinking about like, oh, where was Chris Elliott? It rarely detracts. I rarely let it detract from my enjoyment to think about that stuff.
It definitely didn't detract. It might distract. Like I think that I think that this episode left me only wanting to know more about all of the Larry Sanders story. In fact, it makes me want to go back and watch the Zen Diaries of Gary Shandling.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
I'll totally meet you there. It didn't distract me from enjoying the episode, but it certainly got me thinking about what was really going on behind the scenes, because every one of these episodes does that. Every one of these episodes is built on something. Some of them are smaller things than others, right? And this one's a pretty big one.
What about you, Bryce? You didn't really have baggage one way or the other when it comes to Chris Elliott, I assume.
No, not really. I know him from Schitt's Creek most recently. There was something else that he was in an Adult Swim show. I don't remember which. He was in one of those Adult Swim live action shows, and I just thought it was weird to see him in something this early. Because I don't know much of his career before that, so I was like, "What? How is he?"
Funny. What's so funny is I still think of him as the guy from Letterman, and then and he also had his own show and movie, Cabin Boy. And then I remember that he's in Schitt's Creek because I haven't watched Schitt's Creek.
And I guess it's double weird to remind you that, from my perspective, like, oh, he's here because he's the guy who keeps having failed projects, and that's the joke. Is that he can't, everything he touches turns to garbage.
Mm-hmm. And I did think it was a fun sort of thing at the end with who is it at the very end? The other guest that Larry decides to pitch to. Kevin Nealon.
Oh yeah,
at the very end, and Kevin Nealon also gives this like really crappy idea for it was just a fun 1-2 thing of like, oh no, you're not gonna. There's like Larry needs to come up with whatever the idea is for this thing, because comics aren't gonna have any corporate friendly ideas. Come up with a friends like thing.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other thoughts on the Larry Sanders Show?
No, it continues to be my comfort food, and I'm afraid of what's going to happen when I run out of my comfort food.
Still planning to go?
That is the Larry Sanders Show, episodes 11 and 12 of season 4. Thank you for supporting us on Patreon, patreon.com/Cordkillers. And thank you for hanging out with us on Spoilerin Time. You can always get these early if you're a patron at patreon.com/Cordkillers. We'll spoil you again next time.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.